All right. Good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. And welcome to the January 2024 Argo CD and Rollouts Committee meeting. I'm your host for today, Jesse, a maintainer of the Argo project. If you haven't already, please add yourself to the attendee list on the shared Google Doc. And while you're there, if you have any agenda items, issues, or topics that you'd like to discuss, please feel free to comment on the Google Doc, and we should be able to get to them um, in the meeting. Lastly, a reminder that the Argo project does adhere to the CNCF Code of Conduct, so please be courteous and respectful to each other. And this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube. All right, with that, today we have Michael Crenshaw from Intuit doing a preview of the Argo CD upcoming 2.10 release. So I'll hand it over to Michael.
Cool. And I made slides because I am a professional. Alrighty. So first, some statistics. This time around, we had 117 contributors, and 91 of those being folks who have never contributed to Argo CD before. That number isn't super surprising. Like, a lot of folks will come through and make one or two changes just because they need it for their organization. But it's always exciting to see that we're able to get those changes in for people who've never contributed before. It's 29% more contributors than we had in 2.9. That number fluctuates a little bit depending on just how long the release cycle happens to be, but it's still always exciting to see a little bit of growth in that number. And finally, we have 55 new features. Some of these are pretty small. It can just be a UI tweak that improves the developer's life a little bit. But some of them are really, really massive, and all of them, really contribute to the product. All right, let's look at some of the features. One that I'm extremely excited about, and one that I think a lot of folks have been anticipating for a long time, is a new field in the application set spec called template patch. So application sets for a long time have been pretty darn strict about what you're allowed to template in the application. So for example, everything had to be a string. Like, you could template in a repo URL or a target revision. But if you wanted to template in, for example, a list of values files for a particular application, the app set controller just wasn't capable of handling a list field. Some of that was a bit by design. I think that, when you open up templating a lot, you open up yourself to bugs like incorrectly formatting YAML. I think everyone's experienced using a Helm template and getting their white space handling incorrect. So it's a bit nicer for user experience for simple use cases to have very simple templating. But when you need to do some of these use cases I've listed here, you really need the fuller power. So for folks who are willing to take on the little bit of extra sort of maintenance and care burden of getting their templates just right, this field allows them to make just completely arbitrary changes to an application spec, last mile changes before applying the application to the repository. Maybe the biggest use case is enabling and disabling autosync and prune for individual apps via sort of a GitOps manner. And then one that I'm super excited about is the ability to produce both a Helm and a customized application from the same application set. So give that a try. Tell us what use cases you have for it. And ideally, if there's a really common use case that we forgot to mention in the documentation, add docs and just give people a template patch that they can copy and paste into their app set. All right, second thing is server-side diff. This one is a little bit kind of behind the scenes, but its impact is going to be huge. So a few releases ago, we created the ability to apply resources with server-side apply, and that solves all kinds of problems. It's the direction that Kubernetes is going in general, is when you apply a resource, you let the Kubernetes API handle a lot more of the work, and you do less stuff in the client. When we added the server-side diff feature, we quickly noticed cases where diffing misbehaved. So the example I have in the screenshot here is where I've got a custom resource definition where the cron spec field has a default value. So if you specify cron spec null, when using server-side apply, the server will calculate, oh, we're going to actually, instead of null, use 50 star star star. The problem is Argo CD prior to this feature didn't know how to respect the default field that the server side was applying. So you'd get this weird diff. You would end up with Argo CD, if you're using self-heal, constantly reapplying cron spec null, and Kubernetes being like, yeah, I know, you want 50 star star star. So server-side diff is something that Leo wrote up in the past month or so that actually asks the Kubernetes API to calculate the predicted live state of a particular manifest so that we know that cron spec null actually means 50 star 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 once it's applied to the server. Enabling it is pretty easy. Just set controller diff server side in your Argo CD CMD params config map to true. And anytime you use server side apply on an application, it'll automatically use server side diff. We do have an annotation that allows you to opt in and out of that feature on a per application basis, and maybe a per resource basis. Leo can correct me in chat if I'm wrong. But yeah, this is definitely something that if you're ready to use server-side apply, which everyone should be moving that direction, you ought to go ahead and enable this feature and let us know of any bugs you encounter. But ideally, it will only be fixing bugs. So third and final feature I will talk about is the ability to self-serve notifications. So apps in any namespace was a huge step forward in Argo CD's ability to provide self-service multi-tenancy via a GitOps model. Apps in any namespace, quick primer, is just the ability to load applications and use Argo CD to manage them when those applications are defined in a namespace besides the application controller's namespace, so the Argo CD namespace. So for example, I could give team 1 and team 2 their own namespaces called app team 1, app team 2, and they can deploy application resources to those namespaces, and Argo CD will handle them. I have the ability to limit which project those applications are allowed to use, so I can still control like the ability to deploy to different clusters. But I don't have to manually review every single application pull request that people are using to deploy their apps. This feature, apps in any namespace, gives us the ability to do things like allow self-service notifications config. So at Intuit, we encountered a problem where we are moving from, I think it's from PagerDuty V1 API to V2 API. And the version 2 of the API doesn't allow us to set like a global root token and send notifications to PagerDuty. You have to do it like per, I don't know what their term is, but like per app, per team. And we have, you know, thousands of applications and hundreds of teams. So the Argo CD team can't manage adding tokens for every single team to our central Argo CD instance. We needed a way to allow them to do it for themselves. So with this change, application teams can deploy a notifications config map and a notification secret alongside their application in apps in any namespace. And the Argo CD notifications controller will see that, pick up the config, and use it. So it's just decentralization of control of that configuration. So that's the last feature I'll mention here. Like I say, there are a lot of them. I think those are kind of the big three that I was most excited about. But we have a blog post that lists a few more, and you can dig into the change log to see more details. I want to point out that, like, obviously a ton of people have put in a ton of work to make this release happen. Special thanks to Katie, who this was her first time sort of managing a release and writing up the blog post. And that position is available for other folks to step into if they want. And also quick shout out to our scoped approvers. Argo CD has a new process allowing more people to approve pull requests. And I just looked at the stats in the last 6 months. So basically the period of time that went into 2.10, we had 42 pull requests merged by scoped approvers. So it's obvious that that process is helping and working and allowing people to contribute, since there are so many people who really, really want to help push the project forward. And that's it. Thank you all. I'll look at chat and see if there were questions.
Yeah, I think the main one that I think will benefit some discussion in the video recording is how um the server-side diff changes the performance characteristics of the controller, since I know when we implemented the diffing on client side, we needed it to be done client side so it wouldn't like constantly hit, incur the least amount of load on the Kubernetes API server. So when this is enabled, how does it avoid hammering the API server for like every reconciliations, for example?
Right. So I can answer that. So this was one of our main concerns while implementing this feature, Jesse.
Mm-hmm.
So currently the this feature leverages the diff caching, right? So Argo CD will be pulling Git every 3 minutes and will recalculate the diff on the client side, and that's what it does today every time it pulls. So the new cache, so first of all, the cache was a bit broken. So I fixed that part of the code. So there was already a diff caching mechanism implemented in the controller, but that wasn't really working as expected. So now it is working, and I made it in a way so when the server-side diff is enabled, it will only hit the API server on certain conditions. So it has to be a new hash in Git, or the application spec needs to be changed, or it has to be manually asked by the UI that a refresh is required. And those are the three situations where it will avoid the cache and call kubeAPI. So with this, we avoid hitting the kubeAPI every 3 minutes. But I suspect, and this is something that we want to run inside Intuit as soon as possible, that it will still require some additional level of performance tweaking. So, but I didn't want to do some premature optimization. So yeah, for now, we do one request per resource whenever one of those three situations apply. And we avoid hitting that API server every 3 minutes.
Okay, and it's at the per resource granularity. So if some resources don't change and others do, then only the changed ones would get this treatment or go calculate ask for the new.
Today we send the request for all of them. Those are all improvements that we can make to reduce the call. And also, one thing that maybe we can think about is not sending one request per resource, but sending one single request in bulk, right? So, and then we get the response, split all the manifests the way Argo CD expects it to be provided, and instead of having that with multiple requests, we have it working with only one. So this is all improvements that I think can be done in the future, but I'm curious to see how this will perform with the current implementation.
Okay, thank you. And I know you answered this in the chat already, but for the benefit of the video, the question I had was, does server-side diff only work when you are using server-side apply?
Yeah, that's correct. At least that's my understanding. Leo can clarify if I'm wrong.
Yeah, actually, no. Actually, whenever those two are independent, whenever we enable server-side diff, that logic will take over all the diff, right? So we have the possibility to enable server-side diff at the application level or at the controller level. So what Michael showed here in the slide was the method to enable it at the controller level, but it can also be enabled by an annotation, and then a single Argo CD application will start using the new diff method. And I think that's the preferred way at the beginning, so we can validate.
Okay.
But no, the answering the question is no. Server-side diff can be applied on server-side apply and client-side apply syncs.
Okay, so that basically it's all or nothing. So when you enable it, all your apps will get the treatment.
If you enable at the controller level, yes, but you can also enable at the application level.
Oh, okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Let's see what other questions we have. Blake has a question if there are plans to make server-side apply / diff the default in Argo CD. And Michael had a response.
Yeah, I've got a lot of reasons why I think a 3.0 makes sense this year. There are a lot of these sort of things that we've set up as preview features and a number of things that we've sort of deprecated. I think it's time to cut a 3.0 this year, and I think that switching to server-side diff and server-side apply by default would be a good candidate for 3.0.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's probably a backlog of things that we want to affect as part of this 3.0. Things like, getting out of V1 Alpha 1 comes top of mind to me. But I think especially something as impactful as this one, I think we'll want to enable the feature internally to whoever's running, see how it behaves, and then iterate on that. And then once we feel it's on par with the performance of current, then I think it makes sense to make it the default.
Yep, and I know at Intuit we plan to enable server-side diff for like our central Argo CD instance. We were on about 50-ish. And Leo, I don't know if we plan to enable that just for like the other 50 Argo CD instances or literally every app that our central instance uses. But either way, we'll be using server-side diff heavily soon.
All right, I don't see any other questions. Let me check the meeting notes to see if anyone posted any additional topics. Don't see anything there. Did anyone have any other further questions or discussion topics they want to bring up?
Maybe one last thing on the server-side diff, something I discussed with Alex in the past, is that if it proves to be, something that we can really use as a default, by removing the existing client-side diff from Argo CD will allow us to do a huge cleanup in the project. So right now we bring the entire Kubernetes libraries, which is a very heavy part of GitOps engine. So that will enable this huge cleanup. Also, the fact that during applies today, we have to run a dry run. So that code also will be able to be avoided. So basically, while doing applies, if we are using server-side diff, we don't have to run the dry run syncs on every time we sync, right? Because this is already done by the server-side diff. So future improvements that this will enable if it proves a good feature, basically.
Oh, so your point about this is that server-side diff is effectively kind of like a apply run that we pre-calculated just as part of normal reconciliation, so that and then what that enables is that during the action when someone clicks sync, since we already pre-calculated that, that whole phase of the sync process goes away. Is that
that's exactly it? Yeah.
Okay.
That is a possibility. So we can avoid because today whenever we click sync, Argo CD runs a dry run on
Right.
every single resource to make sure the resource is valid and make sure we're not going to have errors like in the middle of the apply, right? So to avoid the cluster being in a unhealthy state, just applying half of the manifest,
Right.
that's the reason why Argo CD runs that today. But with server-side diff, that likely going to be, we're going to be able to avoid that additional step.
Yeah, that would be a good improvement. All right. So I did add the link to the blog post, so there's some more information there about in more detail about like these features that Michael went over. That's in the community working talks, as well as I think he posted in the community Slack as well. Okay. So if there are no other topics, I think we'll end a little early. So thanks everyone, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Happy New Year. Bye.